Welcome to the Vault Excel, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I'm going to bring you commentary from last week's testimony in the trial of Trezell and Jacqueline West. They have been indicted on murder charges of their two adoptive boy children and other said charges: fraud, calling emergency services for children that were not in their custody and believed to have been dead at the time of that 911 call. Let's get into that information, and then I'll also recap what was said in court today. Thank you for joining me. Jurors on Wednesday heard hours of testimony regarding DNA testing of items seized from the California City home where Jacqueline and Trezell West were living when they reported their two youngest adoptive sons missing. In painstaking detail, Kern Regional Crime Lab, criminalist Jihad Kim went over multiple items he tested: blankets, car seats, mattress covers, and the DNA evidence retrieved. Most items did not test positive for DNA from Orrin 4, Orson 3, who were reported missing December 21st, 2020, and are presumed dead. But under cross-examination, Kim acknowledged certain items were not tested for DNA as no stains were found on them. Not every stain found was tested, and it was inconclusive as to whether the boy's DNA was present on certain items located in a bedroom. Kim's testimony came on the 13th day of trial for Trezell and Jacqueline West, who faced murder and other charges in the deaths of Orrin and Orson. The boys' bodies have not been found. The prosecution alleges the boys died in September 2020, 3 months before the West reported them missing, while defense counsel has argued authorities failed to properly investigate other potential suspects and keep accurate records. The Wests have said the boys disappeared while playing outside after Trezell West, who was gathering firewood, briefly went indoors. The trial will resume Monday, which was today. Judge Charles R. Brenner said they're ahead of schedule and the jury could receive the case around May 17th instead of the original projection of late May. The Wests have 4 of the children, 2 biological, 2 adopted. They're expected to testify next week, which was today. Let's see. Also Wednesday, Kern County District Attorney's Office investigator Darren Wonderly testified to call detail records he obtained for the West, as well as Ryan Dean, the boy's biological mother. The records for the West show frequent usage of cell towers in California City beginning September 11th, 2020. Numbers associated with Jacqueline and Trezell West went back and forth from Bakersfield to California City from that date to September 20th, 2020, according to Wonderly's testimony. Prosecutor Eric Smith has said both boys died that month. The Wests moved from an apartment in Bakersfield to a house in California City. A number associated with Dean didn't use a cell tower in California City until December 23rd, 2020, 2 days after the reported disappearance. Wonderly said the records showed Dean has testified she went to the West home on that date to question them. If you need verification for the information, KGET is the source. Hello for joining me. Some items were tested, some were not. The defense feels as though other avenues were not exacted as far as finding other suspects, such as pedophiles in the area that could have abducted the children. But I've brought you testimony from court stating from neighbors, cameras, and video advantages of the said house that no one was seen coming or going from the house out the gate, from the front of the house, no children wandering out of the gate or coming out of the front door. Now, they will say that some car, a car, more cars passed by but were not investigated or mentioned. I do not know. I was not there. So what was tested, not tested, as far as evidence? What items are they speaking of that were not tested of the boy's DNA? I'm curious. They mentioned Ryan Dean as far as her cell phone pinging in the Cal City general area. The December 23rd, when she went to question them about the children, once she found out that the photographs mentioned of the missing children were indeed her biological children. Naturally, that information was entered into evidence because some people perhaps may have believed that she or the biological family were involved, took the children, hid the children. You got that information last week in court, that she lives in Texas and that someone saw the children months after they went missing in Arlington, Texas. I do not know if that is true or not, because the state feels they have evidence to show that the children were murdered in September. But you're now going to hear testimony from the children. Their versions are differing from the interview they gave in December of 2020 at Wanda's house. So what is the truth pertaining to the children? Were they murdered in September, October, or murdered in December? One murdered 1 month, one murdered another week. What is the truth? The fact that the children's versions are differing may be a combination of forgetfulness, forgotten about the children, don't remember the children, intimidated by being in court, seeing their biological parents, adoptive parents, not wanting to hurt them, harm them. What is the truth? I got my first guest up here. Miss Brittany's going to join us after I read this commentary. Hello, Brittany. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. I'm going to talk to you just a minute after I finish this commentary, okay? Okay. So you have to decide what is the truth pertaining to the children's versions of seeing the children, not seeing the children, evidence being tested of the children not being at that said house. Naturally, if they have thrown away their items of clothing, toothbrush, hairbrush, comb, there wouldn't be anything with their DNA. But this testimony says there were items that were not tested. And I'm assuming this is coming from the defense. So I would like to know what it is that they felt was not tested, such as what exactly. Once you test a mattress, pillows, pillowcases, it either is or it ain't. So how far are we going to take the testing? Silverware? What? Toys? How far? I just like to know what are the items that the defense feels were not tested that could possibly have had the children's DNA on them. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to bring you the latest events from court today. All right, everybody. And this is from a day ago, and then I'll go into today's testimony. Okay. With this prosecution expected to rest its case this week in the trial of Giselle and Jacqueline West, who are charged in the deaths of their two youngest children, the jury will hear from the case's most crucial witnesses, the West's four other children. One child, 10 at the time, told authorities he saw Orrin West Ford die at the family's apartment in Bakersfield in September 2020, shortly before the family moved to California City. Okay? The child was 10 at the time. And this is according to prosecutor Eric Smith. The child said Orson West III disappeared soon after. So this 10-year-old child at that time attested that the older child died at the apartment in Bakersfield, and then Orson, the youngest child, a year younger, disappeared soon after. The West three other children also told law enforcement Orrin and Orson hadn't been seen for weeks when the West reported them missing on December 21st, 2020. According to testimony, the bodies of Orrin and Orson have not been found. Smith has said jurors will hear from each of the four children who were taken into protective custody. The Wests are charged with second-degree murder, among other offenses, and face life in prison if convicted. They told police Orrin and Orson, both of whom they adopted, disappeared while playing in the backyard of the California City home. Defense lawyers Timothy Hennessy and Victor Nassier representing Giselle West, and Alexa Torres Stallings and Fatima Rodriguez representing Jacqueline West will likely attack the credibility of the children and the techniques law enforcement used when interviewing them. Each child was 10 or younger at the time of their initial interviews. Torres Stallings has previously remarked on a California City police officer's lack of training in interviewing child witnesses. Arlington, Texas. Last week, an FBI agent during cross-examination by Hennessy confirmed a tip had been received from someone who reported seeing the boys in Arlington, Texas, months after they were reported missing. The agent testified the information was forwarded to Bakersfield police. Ryan Dean, the birth mother of Orrin and Orson, testified by Zoom after the agent. She confirmed she has an apartment in Arlington. The address where the caller reported seeing the boys and the address given by Dean are roughly 2.5 miles apart. Very interesting, according to an online mapping website. Dean was excused after testifying for the prosecution, but will likely be recalled for further testimony once defense lawyers begin representing their case. Defense attorneys have argued authorities immediately focused on the West and failed to consider others, including members of the boys' biological family, while conducting their investigation. Closing arguments are expected to be given around mid-May. Well, as most of you know, it is the 1st of May, and this case is going along. And this is the presumption that possibly mid-May, the jury will get the case. So you hear a little bit about the biological mother, and assumedly, why is because, as you hear, the defense feels as if the state did not look into other people as conspirators, co-conspirators to take the children. So what is going to be interesting is what the state is alleging, that someone else took the children, but not these people, not the West, not this husband and wife, possibly the biological family or somebody else. And then you have this tip that went into the police. So let's ask this obvious question. Who was the person that called in the tip that the children were seen in Texas? Did the call come from California or someone from Texas? Number one. Were the children seen in Texas or not? The state says the children are dead. So they couldn't have been seen months after they went missing if they were presumed dead in September of 2020. The fact that they said the address of that they gave of where they thought they saw the children allegedly is 2.5 miles from Miss Dean's apartment at that time. Very interesting information. One moment, please. I want to take a brief break. 1 second, please. Okay, thank you for joining me. Now let's get to today's testimony. So, as I said, call goes into law officials that they saw the children in Arlington, Texas. The alleged residence 2.5 miles from where Miss Dean was living at the time. Is this information factual? All this will come into someone's mind to say, well, what do I believe? Children giving different versions of when they last saw the children. The defense saying the state did not investigate proper avenues of other people that could have taken the children. And then someone calling in saying they saw the children in Texas. So you have three different clauses for reasonable doubt. And that is all the defense has to do. It's exact reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury panel to say, hey, the state is saying these two people killed these kids. We've got one child saying they saw the child die. Then we've got one saying they saw one child here, one child in Cal City. And they're all conflicting now versus what they told authorities in 2020 of December. Then we have someone calling saying they saw the children in Texas, 2.5 miles away from where Miss Dean lived at the time. But we also have Miss Dean's phone records to verify allegedly she was only in that demographic of Cal City December 23rd when she heard the children were missing. What is the truth? What evidence does the state have to show that the children went missing? Now, we already know that they already knew that the children were dead shortly after they went missing. And they held that secret for a whole year and a few months, which was rather disturbing to the general public. But one would say, well, they were gathering their evidence so they could bring forth the indictment against the two. So naturally, they wouldn't tell the general public that they suspected the parents because of the information they got from the children. Because obviously the children are the ones who told about what happened to the kids. But they never let us know. And I was a bit perturbed. And another question I had also, if this is true that Cal City and Bakersfield knew that they had murdered the children right after the report went in of them missing, did they also let them have access to their adoptive and foster care children while the children were in the state's care? Because that would be diabolical to let these same children visit these parents or grandparents or anybody else, knowing they are the same ones that murdered the children, and also coerce these children to murder their siblings. That would be cruel and unusual punishment. And I pray that we don't get information that in that 1 year or so that they were free and walking around, that they had access to their children by monitored visits. Because in the end, it's still disgusting, whether the visits were monitored or not, that you would allow murderers to see their children and they're the ones who coerced them to murder their siblings. So will we find that information out? Very interesting. And also, what I just read to you is that Ms. Dean will be called back perhaps to testify. So what else do they need to ask her, Ms. Ryan Dean? Will they try to bring up information from her past of her child rearing stint that was brief in raising these two children and her other kids? Will you get testimony to the truth pertaining to the biological mother and that she, in fact, has 4 children and her relationships that she has or don't have with her older 2, why they're never mentioned, and also what actually happened for her to lose custody of her 2 children? And will they also bring in testimony from anyone who thinks perhaps that the biological family has something to do with the disappearance of the children? But once again, as I state, the state says they believe Jacqueline Trezell murdered the kids and murdered them in September of 2020. I'm going to bring you more information pertaining to today's testimony from court. And then we'll let our guest give her opinion pertaining to what was said in court last week and today. If I can just find this information, I'll be all right. I had it and then I lost it. Let's see. 1 second. Can't keep up with everything. This is really bad for the state with the differences of opinions with the children that you're going to hear. This is not good. This is not good at all, because this is where doubt comes in. A 16-year-old boy who lived with the couple charged in the deaths of Orrin and Orson West testified he witnessed the wife on multiple occasions place younger children in a chokehold to get them to stop crying. The teen, a foster child who lived with Trezell and Jacqueline West for about a year around 2016, years before the West adopted Orrin and Orson, demonstrated in court on Monday the move he said Jacqueline West used on the West's 2 other adoptive children, especially one who cried frequently. Very interesting there, because we hear this from the children pertaining to the small boys who are missing and presumed dead, that they cried a lot. Now we have another person who lived in the house who says Jacqueline used a chokehold move on children that cried frequently. Very interesting. He said Jacqueline would sit on the floor with the child in front of her and interlock her arms around his neck while using her legs to grip the child's legs and hold the rest of the body still. The teen said Jacqueline West would scream at the child as she held him in that position for a period of time that could last anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. The teen said he got angry but was young and couldn't do anything to stop her. Under cross-examination, the teen said he had a bed in a room of his own while living with the West and had enough food and clothing. He acknowledged telling Wanda West, Trezell West's mother, that he wished he could return after he was sent to another home. Now, one would have to ask, why was he sent to another home? Because the only way he would get sent to another home was if they requested that he be removed. So that would be weird to find out they wanted this child out of their house, but yet he's telling the mother, Trezell's mother, he would like to go back. And now you have to ask, why was he still in contact with Trezell's mother? Is it because she was nice to him? He liked her. She liked him. They had a good rapport. What's the truth to the relationship with this young man and the West when he was in their house? Because you always have to ask that question. He left, tells Trezell's mom, I wish I can go back. So why were you removed? Or did the state just decide to remove him? I can't see the state just removing the child for no reason, due to the fact California has limited homes available for foster care children, like so many other states here in America. Very interesting. The Wests are charged with second-degree murder and other crimes in the deaths of Orrin Ford Orson III, who prosecutors say died about 3 months before the Wests reported them missing on December 21st, 2020. Their bodies have not been found. The couple had said the boys disappeared while playing outside when Trezell West, who said was gathering firewood, briefly went into the California City home. The Wests lived in an apartment in Bakersfield until September 2020 when they moved to California City. Immediately after his testimony, the prosecution began calling the West children to the stand. First came the adoptive children 10 and 8. The 10-year-old testified he remembered living in the apartment in Bakersfield and house in California City, but he struggled to answer a number of questions posed by prosecutor Eric Smith, among them the names of his adoptive parents. Well, that's strange. He doesn't remember his parents' name. Is it because he's gone through several homes in the past 2 years to where he can't remember their name? 2.5 years. Interesting. Wow, wow, wow. The boy was able to identify Trezell and Jacqueline when shown photos. That's interesting, because if you're 10, you would have been 8 or 7, about to turn 8 perhaps. So a 7-year-old can't remember Jacqueline and Trezell until shown photos. Is it because he just had a short-term memory? Traumatic experiences since leaving their house? Traumatic experience while living at their house? What's the truth? He went back and forth as to whether Orrin and Orson lived in a California City home. He told Smith the last time he saw the boys was at the apartment, but later indicated the boys had moved to California City with the rest of the family. See, this is going to be a problem for the state. We have reasonable doubt now because the children's versions are conflicting and different than what they told law enforcement back in December of 2020. When asked about being dropped off at his grandmother's house days before the boy's disappearance was reported, the child said Trezell and Jacqueline West and the other children were in the van, with the exception of Orrin and Orson. Now, this is the same child that's going back and forth about Bakersfield and Cal City and the children being at one place and then being at another. His response remained the same for both the prosecution and defense. During his interview with police the day after the boys were reported missing, the 10-year-old said that the last time he saw Orrin and Orson was at the Bakersfield apartment. A number of the responses the children gave Monday differed from what they told police in 2020. The 8-year-old on Monday said, I don't know to many of Smith's questions. He said Orrin and Orson stayed at the California City house for a long time. So we have a 10-year-old saying, oh, mercy, let me go back. The 10-year-old is saying he saw the kids at the apartment, but later indicated the boys had moved to California City with the rest of the family. Now we have the 8-year-old testifying that both of the children stayed at the California City house for a long time. In the police interview played for the jury, however, the boys said Orrin and Orson were in California City for one day, but then they left. Okay? Orrin and Orson were in California City for one day, but then they left. He told police he didn't know where they went. So is it possible that the children did go to Cal City, but they didn't stay long? Or B, one of the children made it to Cal City and he didn't stay there long. The 9-year-old biological son of the West, who, like the other boys, wore a white collared shirt to court, and he doesn't remember Orrin and Orson. Are you all hearing this? The biological son of these two heathens does not remember seeing these two boys. Is it possible that he is showing favoritism for his parents who are on trial for double murder and set charges against the children, and he doesn't want anything bad to happen to his parents? He's heard a lot of rhetoric, gossip pertaining to his parents. He remembers being at that house. He remembers those two children. He possibly one of the kids that didn't like or get along with the boys, as we've heard in testimony. He doesn't want to get his parents in trouble. Or is this a case of also mind control from these two sitting behind the defense table, still working on their boy child? What do we have here? Let me finish this commentary for you all. Once again, the 9-year-old biological son says he didn't remember them. But the boy told police Orrin and Orson lived with the family in Bakersfield, but not California City. An officer in another video played in court asked why the boys didn't make the move to California City. Because they were crying a lot, the boy said. He said the West told him Orrin and Orson went back to where they used to live. The boy resumes testifying Tuesday at 9 a.m. The West's other biological child will also testify. Assumingly, this will be the older son that will testify tomorrow. This is some very strange testimony, and it could be just the obvious. These were children who had some traumatic experiences, life-altering experiences since being removed from the West home. They have possibly gone from house to house because there's no guarantee that these children have stayed in the same foster care home since being removed in December of 2020. We are now have just come out of 22. So 2 years those kids have been gone and a few months, and it is now May. So perhaps their memory is short, and naturally one child's memory will be different than another child's memory. And we've learned that with child rearing. One child's experience with their parents and siblings will not be the same as that of another child, depending on how the child was treated and also his or her perception of his family dynamic. Is it possible the state has it wrong? The children were alive, taken by some other persons, living somewhere else in California, Oregon, Texas. What are we saying? The state says, I have proof. Undoubtedly, I have proof they died in 2020. So let's ask the state, what do you have to prove and show these boys were murdered in 2020, September? Blood spatter, matter, hair, fibers. Testimony from children that one was dead, orchestrated by the family, participated in the deaths of the children, one or more children. Is that what we're going to hear next? The children testified that they were coerced in beating the children to death, or the parents harming the children. What's interesting about this one child's testimony is asking Jacqueline and Giselle West where their siblings are, and they said, oh, or they just told them they're gone. They went back to where they came from. Interesting. And could somebody have been trying to spite Miss Dean, implicate her and her family as being co-conspirators of taking the children by saying, oh, they're in Texas, because somebody knew Miss Dean lived in Texas and they wanted to get her in trouble legally as a co-conspirator for kidnapping? What is the truth? All right, Miss Brittany.
Hey, sorry, I was on mute.
So you heard everything that was read.
Yeah, it's a lot. I hate I missed the
about the
other
children. Each child's giving a different opinion pertaining to who made it, who didn't.
So
not good.
I think they're young for sure. You could definitely tell the middle boy. What else was he? The younger boy that testified today. He sounded very young. I didn't catch how old he was, but he just sounded very young. I think no, I don't. It is conflicting that they are saying they don't know or they don't remember. Yeah. But
I think it's interesting that the biological child is the one that says, I don't remember them. That's kind of cold to some degree, because it almost makes me wonder if he's lying.
He didn't remember them. It seemed that they showed him a picture. Yeah. And then it was, yes. But when they said who lived in the Bakersfield apartment with you, the very first thing he says, Orrin and Orson, then he names the rest of them. But it was interesting that he named Orrin and Orson first then, but it wasn't until he was really shown that picture. But it is very conflicting compared to their interviews. But I think that those interviews that they're showing, which they're super hard to hear, I think that will kind of save that, considering that they are young and it has been 2 years. Mm-hmm. And at the time of these interviews, that was fresh. So that's more, believable, of course.
Well, that's true. Because at the time, they always say that with anybody, you forget things as time goes by.
Right. So I think that with them having that to kind of back it up, and once they kind of show them some of it to refresh their memory, it does seem to help. But I think I also believe that it's not, I don't like the fact that they are on the stand in front of Jacqueline and Trezell. I would think that would be intimidating.
Yes, I think they should have done them from another room.
Right. Whether they're biological.
He talked to them through a monitor.
Right. Or yeah, I don't really like that. Because they're young. These kids that I heard today, they seem very young. So I just think that could be very intimidating.
Okay. And that maybe let me ask you this: do you believe? Listen, do you believe the children are dead?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe the children were murdered in September 2020?
Yes.
So you don't think Ryan Dean and her family members took the children?
No.
Killed the children?
No.
Because that's all the defense has to do is plant reasonable doubt, and they've done that by having the children on the witness stand now.
Yeah, but I get that their testimony.
Listen to this. Hold on. Because this is what's getting ready to happen. This is what the defense is getting ready to say. If they can't remember the children, but they can remember the children. They can remember they were in Bakersfield. Then they can remember they were in Cal City. These are also the same children that said, yeah, I saw one dead. Why would we believe them? See where I'm going?
I do, but I just feel like that it has been 2 years, but I think that initial interview that they're showing of them will kind of trump even what they're saying right now. I mean, to hear the biological son today say, when did they leave? When did they move from the house? When they started crying? Who told you that? Mom and Dad. Where did they go to live back where they used to live? Who told you that? Mom and Dad. And I think it's interesting that the most damning evidence is coming from their biological children, and hopefully it will be the oldest that takes the stand tomorrow, and that will have
the crying. I believe there's some truth to that, because we've heard that earlier about the children crying, and I think that came from Jacqueline, if I'm not mistaken, when maybe the officer or somebody was talking to her, asking her questions about the children and the favoritism and how she cared more about her own children than them, if I'm not mistaken. But I do remember hearing somebody else mention something about the children were crying.
Yeah, and both children that I heard today mentioned the crying.
So let's go here. The older foster child who lived with them years back, who still wanted to go back to their house, which makes no sense to me, because usually when children are removed, they're either removed because they wanted to leave, or their family petitioned to get them, or the foster family had issues with the child. And then the fact that he stayed in contact with Wanda, let's touch on that for a second before we go into the chokehold situation. How do you feel about this child wanting to go back to this family after saying he got upset when he saw Jacqueline putting kids in the chokehold? Why would he want to go back to that?
Yeah, I can't imagine why he would want to go back to that.
And the fact that he'd been talking to Wanda once he left their house.
Wasn't it said at one point that Wanda was involved in some sort of social service work too?
Yes, that was said. That was the rumor. That's how they got on to be parents. But we've heard that it was through Jacqueline's mother.
Yeah,
that's how they got on. I don't know what's the truth.
Yeah, and I don't either. And that is strange. If she truly wasn't involved with it, I mean, I could see maybe if Wanda was involved with maybe social services somehow, that maybe that's the contact that she had. Maybe she would somehow run into this child. I don't really know. But otherwise, I don't know. And I do think it's a little odd, for him to mention holding.
I can only see him saying that is if where he was at the time of speaking to Wanda, it was not a great place.
Yeah. I mean, because I can't imagine a kid wanting to go back.
He had food. He didn't have enough clothing. Maybe the next place he's at wasn't that great.
Yeah, that would be my only other thing.
But you still have to ask, why was he removed?
Right.
Because, there was rumors of one of the children running away because he was getting in trouble with neighbors and stuff, hanging out, not coming home.
Yeah, and I think he was supposed to be an older kid, isn't that when they lived at the
So I wondered if this is one of those, if this is the child that they had rumored that was staying in trouble, and I guess they sent him back. I don't know, because we don't even know how many children they have had. And that's a good question, too. How many children have they fostered before they were arrested?
Well, and that's interesting that you say that, because their biological child that was on the stand today was asked if he knew what fostering was, if he knew what adoption was. He's 9 now, so he was younger then, of course. But even today, he said no, he doesn't know what that means. So I found that interesting with the amount of kids that were coming in and out of that house.
Yeah, very interesting.
Very strange situation.
Hold on. Let me see who this is here. Hello?
Hey.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Georgia. This is Miss Manda.
Okay. We're echoing. Let me see if I can get Brittany, mute yourself.
Sorry.
That's okay. I was trying to hear. I want to see if it would make a difference. Okay. It's still echoing. Maybe you can go down and try to come back up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's talk about the chokehold. That was deep, because I was trying to, I had to imagine that. I said, oh, he must be sitting in front of her, her legs wrapped around and her arms around their neck. Now imagine doing that to somebody 2 and 3.
Yeah, I can't imagine that.
You could suffocate them or choke them.
In a matter of minutes, and he said up to sometimes an hour.
An hour.
That's horrific.
So you have to ask yourself, who taught her how to do that? Because that's not something I've ever thought about doing, to make a child be still. This is not even your typical go in the corner, go in your room, go lie down, a spanking.
Time out.
It sounds like something a guy would do to a child, not a woman.
I didn't get to hear that, because I would love to know what they said Trezell would do when this was going on.
Well, see, that's why they always tell you not to assume who you think the initiator of violence is, because there are times that it is the woman and sometimes it's not the man. You understand? Because you have to ask yourself the ultimate question of why, one, that they adopt boys only, no girls. Now you hear testimony from a former child stating this woman was basically locking the boys in with her legs, compressing them and putting her arms around their neck. That's bad.
That's horrible.
So imagine doing it to somebody crying all the time. Because see, we know the children were neglected. That's the whole purpose of them going into foster care. We have to count how many homes they went to before getting to the West home, then how they were treated in the home by Jacqueline and Trezell West, immediate family, and also the children. We also got testimony from the court that the kids weren't liked, kept separate. I mean, that comes from the detective giving Jacqueline's commentary when first being interrogated. It's very strange.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if this never came up, the whole chokehold situation, until after the boys went missing, and maybe they just interviewed this child, since maybe it was that the child that they
But
had.
they probably went in the database and looked up all the children that they had in their house and asked them about their experiences there.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if this is the first time that came out. I don't know. That's crazy. I would like, to know what they said that Trezell was doing. Did he ever try to stop this?
Right. So we got to ask how many times she's done this to the children. Did it cause any damage to the children that she never took them to the hospital? It's interesting. And yes, what was Trezell doing, and what was his form of punishment to the children if they misbehaved?
Odd, very strange.
And I'm sure the jury members were taken aback because it's interesting. They said he demonstrated it. So imagine that in the court. So what did he use? A dummy? Like a doll?
Possibly, yeah.
Now imagine watching this and imagining it's a woman that's supposed to be doing it to a child.
That's crazy. You could break their little bones.
Right. So if I now know that this is what you did allegedly to a child, what is the worst thing you've done to a child? Considering 2 are missing and the state says you killed 2 children.
God only knows. I feel like there's going to have to be some other evidence that they come out with.
Yeah, because 2020, that means somebody has to have something exact to put their deaths at September 2020. And what is it exactly?
I mean, my best guess would be possibly they, went back to that exact apartment they were in
and found something.
And they were able to find something.
Imagine they've taken scrapings from the wall, carpeting, because most apartments do have carpeting, older apartments. So imagine they pulled up something leaked through the carpeting, some type of matter from the child, skin, sweat.
Right. And even, blood, it could leak down to the actual
padding
boards of the floor, through the padding. Yeah. That's there. I don't know. I hate that you can't go back and rewind because it's so hard to keep up listening to it live. Ugh. Yeah, but I would think that's coming.
They're sitting there listening to their children. How do you think they felt having their children testify about what was going on in their house? Because I'm sure they asked, as you said, they was asked questions about how they were treated as children, what they thought of their mother, Jacqueline. You gave commentary to me about that earlier. So imagine sitting here, you're on trial for murder and other charges, and your children are now testifying to how you treated them and what went on in the house. Because at some point, somebody's going to slip up and tell the truth about how they treated them and the other children, biological and adoptive and foster children.
Right. And that's kind of exactly what I mean about having them on the stand in front of them. I don't like that idea. What is her name? Jacqueline's lawyer asked the younger boy, the adopted child that I heard today, what was one of your favorite things about your mom? And it was a super long silence. And he says, I don't remember. And then they said, what was your favorite thing about your dad? And he said he would play with me. When they asked the biological son, the 8-year-old, he immediately, what was your favorite thing about your mom? He immediately said, every moment was my favorite thing about my mom. Every moment. And then they asked him the same thing about his dad, and he said the exact same thing. Every moment with my dad was my favorite. Which is really heartbreaking to hear, honestly. Because look what they've done. But yeah, I just don't think they need, I don't know. I think that would, I mean, these kids are young. I'm really surprised they're on the stand.
So what, honey? Repeat what you were saying because I was buffering.
I said, these kids are so young. I'm really surprised they're on the stand. I really honestly feel like the recordings that they have alone, you know, the very first recordings they got of them at Wanda's house, questioning them about the boys, that would have been, I really feel like that would have been enough. I feel like these kids have been through a lot.
Let's just say if it was an adult, they basically would say that you were lying. You don't remember. It was just 2 years ago. You see what I'm saying? But they know not to badger a child because they are young. They were young when they were at the house, and every child's experience is not going to be the same. But if you were an adult and you were on the witness stand and you were testifying to what you told authorities from 2 years ago, they would say, well, what's the problem? It was just 2 years ago. That's not really a long time ago for you not to have any memory. It's not like it's, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and they are being very gentle with him. I mean, they really are. In questions that, they completely say they have no idea now that they answered in the interviews, they do try to help refresh their memory.
Yeah, of course.
It's still, I mean, they are being very gentle, but I really feel like that the recordings they have alone would have done a good enough job that necessarily they didn't need to be on the stand.
Okay. But, it's still nothing like if the child is able to speak, bring them forward to speak.
Yes, and the two that I heard speak today, I will say they are very well-spoken children. They really are.
I wonder if the biological boys are together or not.
I don't know. I can tell you that each boy was asked today, like just to kind of warm up questions. And it was like, what'd you eat for breakfast? What'd you eat for lunch? How'd you get here today? And they were like, it was cute. They both said, by car. And they were like, well, who all was in the car? And they named 3 people, 3 of the brothers that rode together. Okay. I don't really honestly know all the biological names, non-biological, to know who is who, to be honest. Yeah. But I will say that the adopted child was asked, when was the last time you seen Wanda West? He said yesterday. Mm-hmm. And when was the last time you seen Maria? He seemed confused of who Maria was. And then they said, your Jacqueline's mother, your grandma. He said, oh, it wasn't that long ago. They haven't finished with the other boys, so they haven't asked him that question yet. But I thought that was very interesting.
You said one of the biological children saw Wanda or an adoptive child saw Wanda?
They haven't asked the biological child that yet. They asked the adopted child, and he said yes.
So let's ask that question. Why would Wanda be seeing one of the adoptive children?
I don't know.
So we have to ask the obvious question. Is she and her family having contact with any of the children, adoptive and biological?
It sounded like it. I mean, because he was old enough to know whether he saw his grandma yesterday or not. I'll say that.
Right. And so we also have to say, does she have, I don't know, visitations?
It sounded to me like
monitor visitations or what?
It sounded to me like both of the grandparents have visitations.
Mm-hmm. Now, naturally, no one has brought forth any charges against them as having knowledge or co-conspiring to kill the children. But some of us have, not so great feelings about either grandparents and knowledge of the 2 boys missing. Because at some point, we do believe they all knew that the 2 were missing. So what I have to ask the state of California, why would you be letting these children have any dealings with these people? Because you were bringing testimony to court that 4 went to see them days before the missing report went in. So they had to have acknowledged that Orrin and Orson were gone.
Right. Or what was the reason? What was their excuse? Because, and maybe they said that Orrin and Orson were with Jacqueline's mother. I don't know. But you had to have a response for that because they bring you all the children.
Yeah. But Daddy testified in court that they hadn't seen them since they moved to Cal City.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about, when they possibly died. It doesn't sound like they did die at the same time. which.
Why you say that?
I mean, well, I hate to say it out loud. I mean, I feel like maybe, especially here in this chokehold situation, that maybe something went too far trying to get one to stop crying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how maybe one of them passed away. And then
remember, initially in the affidavit, the children aided in the deaths.
See, and the more I hear now, I feel like that was
because somebody had to have told them that, because these two have said they're innocent. So they're not going to tell you, yeah, I made my kids beat these kids. So it had to have come from the children.
And see, the way I understood it in the opening statements, it really wasn't that the children aided in it, that they were just aware of it.
So so what are you saying?
I don't.
I remember we read the affidavit.
I remember, yeah. I remember, and that is exactly how we understood it.
That's not how it came out, that the children watched. That they were coerced by the parents.
Right. Hearing it now, I don't feel like that's what they're saying. And that's why I hate you can't go back and replay to hear things better, because it's really hard to listen.
It's going to have to come up in testimony. The state is going to have to ask them, did you ever see any of the children killed, murdered, harmed, beat up? Did you ever participate in beating up the kid? There's no other way around it but to ask. If that's
now I will say, the one child I did see them finish up with today, that was not asked. They were cross-examined by Jacqueline's lawyer, and Trezelle's lawyer did not have any questions for him. But that question was not asked. So I don't know, as you know, the older children come up, how that will go.
Mm-hmm.
Which I didn't start listening until 5 o'clock today.
And now imagine that, if we are to believe that's the truth of how the children died. They were beat up by their siblings. Imagine having to ask a child, did you beat up your brother, and watch him die?
Ugh. Do we have, I hate to talk about the kids, but do we have any idea how old, an age range the oldest was?
I think he was about 9 or 10.
Okay, that makes sense. Oh, hang on, let's see. So the boy, the 8-year-old, or was he 8? I think he was 8. I have to go back and look at my paper. I want to say he said he was the middle child, and the oldest brother was 2 or 3 years older than him. I have to go back and check really quick.
Yeah,
so that would make sense.
13.
And now I would think he would be able to give a, more clear account than the others are currently giving, for sure.
Well, maybe we need to go back and relook at the affidavit.
And I meant to go back and do that, and I just haven't did it, because I don't feel the same that I originally felt when we read that. But it was the wording that was so confusing. And by no means am I skilled in reading all those legal documents. So I don't know. I just don't get that feeling.
The way they worded it, they made sure to do it individually, each kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I need to go back and look at that.
Because that's hard to imagine anyway, a parent beating their kid to death, but then you making your child beat another child to their death.
Okay, so the middle child today that testified, he was 9, and he said his oldest brother is 3 years older than him. So I would think he would probably take the stand after him after they finish.
I wonder if Wanda's going to testify. I figured she would have testified in the beginning.
And I don't know that she has.
Mother she was, and what type of son he was growing up. Because most children, adult children, the defense wants their parents to testify. So why hasn't his mother testified? Only his father. I find that strange. And I also find it strange the way he looks in court. He looks nothing like the original picture when he first stood in front of the news. He looked better. His head looked more Martian-like. And I always said to myself that the person I'm seeing now doesn't even look anything like the person who we saw with the mask on. But naturally, the mask hides your features as far as your nose, your mouth. But I always thought that was 2 different people. I always thought that for some weird reason.
He looks very slender in the pictures on the news. Someone in chat said that if they would have told the kids to get a towel, garbage bag, that could be considered them helping. That makes sense.
Well, we'll see if they say that. That's why I said the bang is on its way. The blows are softened right now with the basic stuff. How are you doing? What'd you eat? That's to open the kids up. But the hard questions are going to come eventually.
Yeah, and I imagine they're saving the harder questions for the older child. Because it's my understanding that the older child is the one that gave pretty much the more consistent testimony in the not testimony, but interview in the very beginning anyways. Mm-hmm. I think that it was originally stated that the other children kind of went back and forth on who was there and who wasn't there when they were there.
Then who gave the blows to the kids?
I don't know. I hate that.
That's what I'm saying. Imagine.
I don't know.
Having to ask a child, did they hurt their sibling? Did they watch them die? How did they look? What happened then? So now we have to ask ourselves what part of their memory is going to come back after the prosecution asks those questions. Because right now it's back and forth, back and forth. I don't know. I don't remember. But imagine being asked, did you hurt your brother? What's the answer going to be?
I don't know.
Because imagine if that's different than what was told in the recording. Lord have mercy.
I don't know. I mean, I would think it's hard to say. I've never been through a traumatic situation.
Well, why would you say that you saw him limp or not breathing or see what I'm saying?
Right. And that's kind of why I say, regardless kind of what they're up there saying now, I think if I was a juror, I'm going to go with these recordings that are being shown because it has been 2 years. Yeah. They are young children. I would imagine if the younger children did see something dramatic that they have somewhat blocked that out. Yeah. I sure hope they have, to be honest, because that's horrible. I mean, these kids, what they're going through right now on this stand, that's what I was thinking today when I was listening. These children, they should be in school, number one, not even dealing with this type of shit. This is ridiculous.
Well, this is what their parents put them in, though. And you also have to remember they're also a product of these two. So that's the scarier part. If indeed these are the allegations from the state, you have to remember, you have to pray that they don't do this again and then become adults and do it again. See, because you end up hearing this type of stuff happening when they're adults because they were exposed to this behavior.
Yeah, I mean, that's just horrible.
And that's what people need to focus on as well, how these children are going to turn out.
I thought it was also interesting. They asked one of the adopted children if he did schooling at the California City House, and he said no. And then they seemed to show him a picture, and they said, "So you don't remember this? You don't remember a room that was set up with a table like a classroom? The room had a sliding door." And they showed him an image, and he said no. So it almost sounded like that was staged. However, the biological child said they did remember doing schooling at home. But it was just strange, though, that the older child did not seem to remember Orrin and Orson at all.
Yeah, that's very scary.
Until they were showed a picture.
Very interesting. That's why I said, because they've been intimidated to say something because their parents are sitting there. Go back to February, see what they're saying. Let me see.
And they asked the biological child, how did you get to the California City home? He said a white car. And they asked him who all went in that vehicle. He named everyone but the boys. He says, what are the names of the people that live with you in the Cal City home? He names everyone but the boys. He asked him if he recognized any of the toys in a photo. He said no. If he recognized the way the room was set up, he said no.
See, we'll go back last year when they were indicted. There is clear and convincing evidence that both defendants are a significant and substantial risk to public safety, Judge Chad Louis said during the arraignment and ordered that the couple be held without bail at the Kern County Jail. Attorneys for the couple left the court without commenting to reporters. Louis granted a motion from prosecutors to seal a probable cause declaration in the case, as well as all offense reports. The judge also scheduled a March 8th hearing on a request from prosecutors for a gag order in the case. Louis set a tentative trial date for May 23rd. Okay, this morning I'm saddened to announce that the investigation has revealed that Orrin and Orson West are deceased, Zimmer said at a news conference Wednesday. Zimmer said a Kern County grand jury, which convened late last year and heard from more than 50 witnesses, returned a 5-count indictment this week against Trezell and Jacqueline West, and that an arrest warrant was issued by a judge. Okay. They face a sentence of 30 years to life in prison, Zimmer said. Bodies have not been found. I'm just reading over the things. Okay. Zimmer declined to release details on the evidence prosecutors have against the adoptive parents. The facts in court will show that we were able to prove to the grand jury that the boys have died, that they were murdered, Zimmer said. And we did that through a combination of direct and circumstantial evidence, and the grand jury was convinced that they were dead. So they took this to the grand jury first without having the bodies.
Yeah, there's got to be another piece coming. I
So
feel like
I'm trying to pull up anything that showed, because naturally they wouldn't talk about it after they released the reports. They fostered these kids in 2018, and the couple officially completed an adoption process in 2019. So
gosh, and you know,
they had them.
the kids were younger, of course, when they were just fostering them. I'm sure that, like, it makes me wonder, were they always, you know, some babies just cry a lot. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you were fostering them, did they cry? Were they crying because something is wrong? That's so confusing about all this crying to me. And it's heartbreaking to think that, you know, maybe they were sick, something wrong, or were they just young and they were whiny, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because if they were that type of children, why would you adopt them? Why would you do that if you knew you couldn't handle something like that? Or were they crying because something's wrong?
She should have never done it, because the stupid part of Jacqueline, it was talking to detectives to say she felt differently toward her biological versus. Well, see, that goes to circumstantial. You're now telling on yourself. You're being charged with murder. So why in the world would you tell a detective who's investigating these crimes that these children are missing? Why would you tell this person, I feel differently toward? You're telling on yourself. Okay. So what I'm saying to myself as an outsider, well, if you felt differently, how far differently would you go in your feelings for these children?
If you feel differently, then you shouldn't even be fostering, let alone adopting.
Yeah, but they did, because they're like a lot of people, 9 times out of 10, it was for monetary gain, just a way to make money without having to go work a 9 to 5.
That's pathetic.
But still, $4,000 or so in California is still not enough money to consider how high it is to live in the state of California.
I don't know. It's hard to make sense of any of this. It really isn't. It's so sad. I mean, they're so young, and not only did you do this to these two little boys, you ruined so many other children in the process. Because I mean, if they're whatever they did witness or whatever the part is and all that, I have a hard time believing that they would remember. And hopefully, the younger ones have, maybe they're able to block that out, and that's not something they'll live with their whole life. I don't know, but that's a lot for some children to go through. I mean, just them being on the stand, even if they don't remember anything at all, I feel like is torture for the kids.
Let's try to listen at some of this. This is from back then. Hold on a minute. Let me see. They're doing them. This is from last year at the Kern County District Attorney's Office. They have the pictures of the children up. Orrin would be the older one, 4. Orson would be the younger one, 3. So which one is supposed to be the one that got gone first? Orrin.
I've not heard them directly come out and say.
I think they did. I think it's been said. One made it and one didn't. Remember? That's the difference of the testimonies of the children.
Which one did you say was the youngest?
The youngest is Orson. Here, let me play this. Oh, Lord. This is from last year, everybody.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Zimmer. I am Kern County's District Attorney. I have information about Orrin and Orson West, the 2 young boys who were reported missing from California City 14 months ago. On December 21st of 2020, Orrin was 4 years old and Orson was 3 years old. Their adoptive parents in California City, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, reported to the California City Police Department that the boys had disappeared from their backyard. The California City Police Department began a search for the boys in the area around their home. After a period of time, the FBI joined in the search, as did the California Highway Patrol and search and rescue from the Kern County Sheriff's Department. The community also came out to assist in looking for the boys, but to no avail. They were not located. 1 week later, crucial information came to light that necessitated the involvement of the Bakersfield Police Department and the Kern County District Attorney's Office. Law enforcement worked diligently, hundreds of hours in the next 12 months, looking for the boys. This morning, I'm saddened to announce that the investigation has revealed that Orrin and Orson West are deceased. The investigation has also revealed that they died 3 months before their adoptive parents reported them missing. However, I am pleased to announce that this week, the Kern County Grand Jury indicted Trezell and Jacqueline West, the adopted parents, for the murder of Orrin and Orson West. The indictment charges 5 counts. The first count is murder. Charges them both with murder, with the victim being Orrin West. The second count charges murder, with the victim being Orson West. The third count charges felony child abuse against the person of Orrin West. The fourth count charges child abuse against the person of Orson West. And the fifth count charges false report of an emergency. Naturally, the first two counts carry the most time in state prison, murder. It is charged as murder in the second degree. That carries 15 years to life, but with two victims, the potential penalty or the maximum possible penalty, if convicted, is 30 years to life for each defendant, Trezell and Jacqueline West. Now, the grand jury indictment is a formal charging document, and we followed a process in charging them before the grand jury, and that was the district attorney requested that the grand jury convene to hear evidence regarding an indictment that we presented them. The district attorney's office then presented information to the grand jury, and the grand jury found there was sufficient evidence to hold Trezell and Jacqueline West responsible for these murders, and they returned what was called a true bill. So oftentimes we call it they were indicted, but what they did is returned a true bill on the indictment. Department 1 Superior Court judge issued warrants for the arrest of the defendants, and they were arrested last night at about 7 p.m. in Kern County. They are currently in the Kern County Jail waiting for an arraignment on the indictment, which will be tomorrow. There will be no preliminary hearing in this case because an indictment is a substitute for a preliminary hearing. In this case, we'll proceed directly to trial. The announcement of an indictment in this case probably raises a lot of questions about the facts of the case and what you and the public would like to know. I'm not permitted to go over the facts of the case in this case, but there is something that I'd like to discuss because the facts of the case are to be what we produce in the jury trial, because we want both the prosecution and the defense to have a fair trial in this case. However, one of the questions that I'm sure you would like to know is, have the bodies of Orrin and Orson been found? And the answer to that is no, they have not been found. However, I would like to emphasize that the fact that law enforcement have not found their bodies does not preclude a murder prosecution. As a matter of fact, there have been many hundreds of what we call no-body homicides prosecuted across the United States successfully, and even no-body homicides have resulted in murder convictions in Kern County. I'd like to introduce the people who are standing here with me today, who have been crucial in bringing this case forward. Eric Smith is the person to my right here. Eric Smith is the supervisor of the homicide unit at the DA's office.
I'm going to stop there because there's like 10 minutes in, 18 minutes left. I was hoping that this, because it's been a while since we watched this a year ago, that it would more descriptive, but I think that's why that we were supposed to just read the affidavit, and after that, there's no more discussion, as you hear her say, as so both sides can have a fair trial. We will reveal why we believe the kids are dead during trial. So we're waiting on that then, because it's already going into May 2nd. Brittany, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
So in a couple of weeks, we will hear hopefully the matter of death and why she believes the children are dead. What brought her to believe that the children are dead?
And for her to make the statement that they were deceased 3 months before reported missing, I feel like there's going to be some forensics and things like that.
Well, it has to be, because you got to remember the biological father said they came to him asking for DNA. Remember that?
Oh, I forgot all about that. Yeah.
2 years ago or so. Yeah. They went to him asking for DNA. And I think then he probably realized, okay, there's something up, because how are you going to ask somebody for DNA when you don't have no bodies to compare?
Right.
Unless you have something that you found that's suspicious in nature and you can compare whatever you got to this person to see if he's a biological descendant. I mean, a relative, or, you know, a parent or whatever. But I do remember that being mentioned. That's how he came into the storyline, is they went to him to get DNA. So they have something. So now we ask ourselves, what is it exactly?
I would assume that it's possibly something for the apartments, because I feel like that they're saying, you know, that
what exactly?
I don't know, blood.
Exactly. I'm gonna spin something to you earlier. I was watching on a forensics show. A man was visiting a man in a trailer. He went missing. The guy who was left behind had law enforcement come to check, talk to the man. Have you seen him? Blah, blah, blah. He told him, yeah, he was here. He's gone. You're free to check out this little trailer, whatever. They checked it out. Boom, boom, boom. But eventually they found a lot of evidence left behind that obviously this guy thought he had cleaned up. For instance, blood spatter, real small specks of blood on a little of this, a little of that. Also, something that looked like skin or flesh, which it was. It ended up being from his shoulder, from where the defendant shot at him 2 times. Okay? Shot him in the shoulder, and then he shot him in the head. Cleaned up the crime scene. When all that blood spatter was tested, it was linked to this decedent man, this man who was missing. And also the tissue from the shoulder was muscle. Okay?
Wow.
The other tissue found was from the cerebellum, which is the part of the brain that controls, they said, the heart. Without that movement, that part of the brain working, you don't breathe. So here you have 2 things left behind by the victim, which is muscle matter from the shoulder found, I guess, on the wall or floor, and then also pieces of his brain. Both tested, both human, and both linked to this missing man. The man wrote letters pretending to be him, that he ran off with a woman, blah, 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 but the evidence said otherwise. Eventually, he went on and confessed, told them where they could find the body. They found the body, but he never said why he did it. So, your mind will wonder. That's what I'm thinking right now, sadly, in pertaining to these 2 children, that it could be a matter of scalp, hair, skin, blood. You understand? Because
some sort of fluids.
If the death is violent, such as a beating, being shot, you leave behind remnants being shot at or beat to death. You think you've cleaned everything up, but there's always the chance of something being left behind. And naturally, when you spray luminol, it could show the crime scene itself.
Right. Because even what's, you don't see with the naked eye.
Exactly. And that's the whole point of people thinking that they've gotten things up, but such as beating somebody, with a bat or whatever. Okay, you're cleaning the peripheral to the eye, but you haven't thought about what's left on the ceiling. And you can't get up on the ceiling to clean. It's very hard to clean a ceiling.
Right.
A lot of people have cleaned just the peripheral, what's to the naked eye, so you thought, but you forgot that you should have cleaned the ceiling, which is the cast off. And blood gets in the most mundane of places, in a room, in a car. And those are the things that people don't think about when they are killing people or transporting a body. And I think the testimony from whoever saw them at the garbage can with whatever they were doing, that's possibly the circumstantial evidence. This historical person. And that testimony, I don't quite understand either. This person is repeating what was told to them. So who is the person that saw it, and what are their relation to the person who testified? That's confusing to me. And I think the person who actually saw them at the garbage can, they're supposed to testify, I thought.
Oh, I missed all about that. Is this a person at
at the old apartment complex.
Okay.
Said somebody told them they were crying hysterical, that they heard some sounds that didn't sound right. Okay, but where would you be that you could hear sounds that don't sound right coming from their apartment? You'd have to be a neighbor.
Yeah. I mean, I would think if it was
But it made it sound like the person was visiting, the way they said the person, it's just the wording of it sounded like a person that didn't live there. So I started wondering if the person who heard it was actually visiting or staying with the person who called law enforcement and gave the 411.
Mm-hmm. But they said they seen them at the dumpsters.
Yeah, the person who's spinning the story is telling law officials, this person called me to say they heard some weird, strange sounds. They became hysterical, and they also didn't think about what they saw months before until they saw the picture of the children missing on the news, and then their memory jogged back to the night they saw them at the dumpster.
Oh, yeah.
And the strange sound, because I think it's a combination of 2 phone calls to this person that testified. And I just thought, well, my goodness, if you felt this way the first time you heard something strange in the apartment, why didn't you call 911? Because I can't see somebody being hysterical and crying to their neighbor or friend or whomever, but then you don't call the police. Because why would I get worked up and cry about something, but then I don't call the police? And did they call the landlord? So that's why I want to know, who is this person that allegedly heard the strange sound from the apartment?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, especially to think that you got worked up enough that you're hysterical. I thought you were saying that they were hysterical seeing them at the.
Well, that's what they're tying it into. Noise, then seen them shortly after at the dumpster. So I'm assuming the sequence is right after the noise.
That is interesting.
So I don't know if this is a matter of didn't want to get involved because you don't want to be implicated in anything. And that's the reason why most people don't want to get involved, is for safety reasons. They don't give a damn, and or they got to testify later, because that's going to be the whole purpose of you giving the information to the detectives. They're going to want you to go to court if indeed an indictment or charges come on that said person or persons. We have to also remember one thing about this story too. These people were free for a year. So imagine running to the police and say, I heard something strange with these people. Now these people, God forbid, they go back and give your name to the police, because the police do have a habit of telling who called and who said stuff, which you're not supposed to be doing that. They got a habit of telling us, well, call anonymous and then do this. But we have seen with first 48 hours, whatever, the people be in the room, whether they're guilty or not, they'll go back and say, oh, yeah, PD Papa said you did this, you were there. Why would you do that? Because if you don't have substantial evidence against that person and you say, oh, your homeboy's in the next room telling everything, you don't have nothing on him. He's walking out of there. You done just set somebody up. You understand what
Honestly, I'm surprised that they were still in California City when they arrested them.
Yeah, out near, weren't they out on a highway somewhere in that thing, that Winnebago?
Yeah, I believe what they're saying in some sort of campground, I feel like, or something like that.
That's something that's strange to me too. Time had them passed to where the case started dying down with all the hoopla and everything with YouTube and this and that. Why are you not staying in your house?
Right. What happened to that house? Does anybody know?
I don't know.
Because they moved out at one point and were at Wanda's, and then I guess from Wanda's they took their little Winnebago to this trailer park campground. But yeah, I mean, that was a nice house. I don't know.
Well, they couldn't, with everybody out there filming all the time, they just went on their merry way.
Yeah, it just surprises me, with all knowing what we know now.
It's scary. I think it's scary, as you heard the judge say in his commentary I read, you are, a detriment to society. You're not safe to be walking around. So he's heard the evidence in the indictment of what they have against him.
And they walked around for so long.
They
I'd
did.
love to know how long, it was before
Huh?
I dropped my phone, sorry. How
Oh.
long before they took custody away of the children? Like, how long did they get to see their children?
Yeah, that's what I said. That's a question I asked earlier in this live stream. Because I thought at one point I read that they were able to see their children before we even had information that they were even suspects, official suspects. Because you also hear in the indictment, she read just now, we got information, Bakersfield got information. We contacted Bakersfield after 1 week. So 1 week later, they got information that these people are involved in the murder of the children. 1 week. We didn't get information until March 22nd, 2022, that they were indicted. That's a whole year and 3 months they walked free. That's deep. Millie says, I wonder if the boys would have answered differently if they were on Zoom instead of being in front of their parents. It's a very good question, Millie. What do you think about that, Brittany? Brittany? I guess Brittany done fell off. Brittany.
Can you hear me?
No, I couldn't. I just asked you a question. Somebody in the chat said, maybe the children would have answered differently if they were on Zoom. That's why I said, is there still an issue of intimidation of the children, even though they've been gone from their family? Doubt that they get to see them. Either one, no one's talking to them. They can't talk to the parents. Parents can't contact them, naturally for security reasons and not to be doing any mind control. Maybe they felt some type of way. Maybe they still feel some type of way toward their parents. They don't want their parents to be going down for these murders. And that's the thing about life, is that children still favor their parents and parents still favor their children and relatives and so on and so forth. And I'm sure they've heard all type of stories pertaining to their family in this case with the small children. And God forbid there's truth that there was alienation of the small children and favoritism of the other biological and other foster children versus the small kids, the children in the house not getting along with the little ones for whatever reason. That could be a reason why their version has changed now. I don't know. I'm not trying to make any claim either way, just throwing out hypotheses pertaining to the variances of the versions. And it could be just the obvious. That's been a little while ago since the children gave their testimony to detectives when they first were interrogated. And perhaps they've put that in the back of their minds. And it's not something that they're focusing on because they are children. Hello, Margaret. Thank you for joining me. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $ Big Angie 129 Cash App, stickers and chats are welcome during this live stream. We've had the link at the top of the chat if you want to come up on the panel to give your opinion pertaining to the said information of the testimony from last week up until yesterday, Monday. The older child, I believe, will be the one to testify again today in court in California pertaining to Trezell and Jacqueline West. If you have not been keeping up with the said information, the children have been giving their testimony, and there are variances of when they last saw the children. 1 minute it's Bakersfield when they last saw them, then it's Cal City, then it was a short while, then it was a long time. And this is what the defense will feed on. And that is called reasonable doubt. All I need is for them to think the children didn't go here or there, or somebody else took the children. Somebody kidnapped the children wandered off, pedophile, whomever. That's what the defense wants. The defense is reveling in the difference of opinions. But naturally, as we've learned, people memories come and go, and these are children. They were younger children. And as I said, they're not focusing on the trial and the parents and the young children. And one child is saying that they don't even remember the kids. That's one of their biological children. So that's kind of interesting. But Brittany says that same child remembered them from the Bakersfield apartment. So that's a bit contradictory. So I don't know, because I have not listened to the audio from court, because I've had a lot of other obligations as of late. So I've been out of the loop a couple of days pertaining to the information, but I wanted to bring you this update pertaining to Cal City so we could stay abreast of the information. They could be scared of the parents. Millie, that is true. They could still, yes. And if we are to believe the one foster child who testified in court yesterday that Jacqueline would put the children, small children, in a chokehold, and they've watched her do this, that is enough to fear a person. Although she's a woman, she's ruthless, because what type of woman would straddle a child to the floor and put her hands around his neck and then wrap her legs around his legs to put her weight on him to make him be still? The foster child said this could go on from 5 minutes to an hour. I can't see holding anyone down like that for 5 minutes unless I'm trying to preserve my life, let alone 1 hour. Jacqueline should have been tired, and the child naturally would have been defeated in being restrained that way. Now imagine restraining a 3-year-old like that to keep him quiet or silent. You could suffocate him and choke him to death. 8 years old, 9 years old, depending on how strong Jacqueline is against the said child. And as Brittany said, pertaining to Giselle, while this was going on with her mechanism to control the children, what was he doing? What was his method of punishment toward the boy children? Why did they adopt boy children only? How many children have been fostered in their custody? How many have been adopted total? Do we have a case of other missing children? I brought you that information last year of a woman who swears her child or whomever was in their custody and that child was missing. Do not know whatever came from that story. No one has basically acknowledged that lady's allegation against the West family, because naturally any information from the state is private and confidential. What would be disturbing if we find out they have other kids they adopted and they are not around? But I would assume the state would have given up some information to detectives and they would have brought us that information. But I'm assuming they went and found children in the database that were in their custody to get their feedback on their relationship while living with them. Now, the weird part of this story, and also strange information from that said foster child, is that although he witnessed Jacqueline mistreating children this way, he was angry, but like he said to the court, I couldn't do anything. He told Wanda West he wanted to go back to this same foster home, and that's troublesome to me. Now, we've seen in cases of abuse where children come out of the custody of their parents, they want to go back to their parents, even if their parents abused them, were mean to them verbally, physically, sexually. It's a sick situation, let's just say. But the kids will still want to go back to that family, parent. And I told Brittany perhaps that child wanted to go back to the West house because where they was worse than that house. So I asked that question. What were the circumstances for that child coming out of the West house? Because you're watching this woman choke down kids by putting her hands around their throat, chokehold, and compressing her legs over their legs. It angered you. So how long did you stay at their house? What were the circumstances for you leaving that house? Did the West ask for you to be removed by the state? Did you ask to be removed, or the state came and took you out of there for some other reason, such as to be reunited with your family? I don't know. And let's also ask, if this child is about 16 years of age or so, where does he currently live? Is he still in the state's care? Because what will be disturbing is if we find out the guy or the young man who testified in court, young boy, he's still in the state's care. And this goes to what we see a lot in dealing with foster care, that the children, no matter how young they are, they move from house to house due to issues with the family, other children, allegations of sexual abuse, physical, verbal abuse, not getting along with the family members, vice versa. And then next thing you know, they're teenagers and they are still in the state's care. And many foster out of 18 and been in the state's care for many, many years. And the ideal is that most people want babies. They do not want school-aged children because they already have an identity. You understand? Well, hanging, I don't know. But my thing is, if you can chokehold a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old, you can do it to a 10-year-old. And perhaps she didn't do it to the older children, Jacqueline, because they could possibly fight back. We know that most boys are stronger. They're more muscular. They can hold, weight as they start to grow. And that's possibly the reason why Jacqueline wouldn't dare try to chokehold, a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, because they probably would fight her back. And it may not end well in her favor. So we have to ask ourselves, how many children has she done this mechanism to? Did she do it with Orrin and Orson? Because naturally her weight would be much heavier on a 3- and 4-year-old. And I can't imagine straddling a little bitty toddler in your lap, because that's basically what you'd be doing because they're so small, and you're putting your arm around a toddler's neck. And what? That would be an awkward way to even do it over a toddler because their legs are smaller. You literally would be compressing their legs. I think that would be painful, and I would see a child's legs going numb at some point. This is cruel and unusual punishment, and trying to picture it is baffling indeed. And as I told Brittany earlier, this child demonstrated this mechanism in court. So imagine him acting this out in court. On what exactly? A dummy? A doll? How big was the doll? I want you to think about that for a second, because that's going to be something hard to visualize. A woman probably 5'2", 3, 4, I don't know how tall Jacqueline is, compressing herself against what? A 3-year-old, 8-year-old? What are we saying? How often did she do this act on her children, biological and fostered and adoptive? And did she also perfect this mechanism on the toddler boys who are now presumed dead? This, I can't see it, but they said he acted it out in the court. Oh, mercy. What a mess. That's the set information, everybody, pertaining to Trezell and Jacqueline West. They're on trial for murder. And as you heard from the district attorney's office from last year, that audio I played, they are facing second-degree murder. And I was trying to pull up the affidavit that stated how it came to be that the charges were formed against them. And from my understanding, that they coerced their children in murdering these kids. So I'd like to find that information again to read that affidavit. Excuse me, because each charge was per child, such as what you just heard from the district attorney in the murder charges. They're charged with murdering each child as a person. And it's very baffling information, just because no matter if they killed the kids by their own hands or they exacted their children to do it, it's still inhumane. Let me read this right quick, and I'm going to leave it here, and then I'll bring you more commentary tomorrow pertaining to Lori Vallow day bail. I'm a couple of days behind because, as I said, I've had other things I had to tend to the past couple of days, but I will bring you an update to recap what has transpired in court and testimonies. This information was uploaded July 7, 2017. I don't know, honey. We're waiting on that. That should be coming up next after the son testifies. Once again, this commentary is from 2017. A parent killing a child happens more often than we think. It's the most unfathomable of crimes, a parent killing their own child. It grabs headlines when it happens, like this week in Georgia, where a mom is accused of stabbing 4 of her children to death. The reality is, filicides happen with depressing regularity in the U.S., and mothers are almost as likely to be the killers as fathers. Of course, we're shocked whenever we hear about a parent taking the life of their own children. Think Andrea Yates or Susan Smith. But what's even more shocking and sad is that this type of crime happens a lot. A study in the journal Forensic Science International looked at 3 decades worth of filicide cases between 1976 and 2007 and found they occurred about 500 times a year in the U.S. Almost 72% of those killed by their own parents were 6 years or younger. Now, mind you, this is commentary from 17. So this is coming up almost 6-year-old content and data. And at that time, the stats were at 72% of those killed by their own parents were 6 years or younger. These children were adopted by Jacqueline and Trezell West, and they were 3 and 4. I want you to think about that, 3 and 4. And 1/3 of victims were just babies under the age of 1 year of age, under 1 year of age. But more than 13% of the victims were adults, specifically people in ages running from 18 to 40 years old. So the threat of filicide doesn't go away when people get old enough to move out on their own. So imagine 13% of adults at that time being murdered, and they're grown. Their parent killing them, and they are their adult child. More than 40% of the killers in these crimes were mothers, with fathers making up about 57% of those who killed their own offspring. Cheryl Meyer, co-author of several books on the subject, said it's probable that a mother kills a child somewhere in the U.S. once every 3 days. Only 10% of the victims were killed by their step-parents. That means 90% of the victims were the biological sons or daughters of the killer. And sons, 52%, were more likely to be killed than daughters, 38%. Parents used what the study called personal weapons to beat, choke, or drown victims in the majority of cases involving underage kids. If the victims were adults, parents used guns in 72% of such killings. There are several reasons why. Dr. Timothy Mariano, the study's lead author, offered up 3 theories. The parents are often mentally ill. They usually have higher levels of testosterone, and the offspring that they kill may be considered unwanted. Forensic psychiatrist Philip J. Resnick, pioneering the study of filicide research, identified 5 major reasons. Altruism. The parents kill the child because he or she perceive it to be in the child's best interests. It may be reality-based. The child suffers from a terminal illness or preceding the suicide of the parent, as the parent feels it would be unfair to leave the child behind to face the cruel world. Acute psychosis. The parent kills the child based on ideas that are inconsistent with reality. For example, the parent believes the child has been possessed by the devil. And that takes us to Lori Vallow Daybell. She claims her husband and her children were demonic spirits. One was inside of the husband, and the children also had become dark. The last one is unwanted child. The parent kills the child that he or she regards as a hindrance. And that will lead us to this case of Jacqueline and Trezell. Although they're not the biological parents of Orrin and Orson, but I do believe they felt that they were a hindrance. Whether it's the fact that children could not coincide in this residence with them, didn't get along with the other children, vice versa. They cried a lot. Maybe the children had some type of mental issues, disabilities. I don't know. In the end, it doesn't matter. You should have sent the children back into foster care if you could not raise them. You didn't favor them. You didn't like them. Your other children didn't like them, didn't get along with them, or the children could not get along with the other children. However you would like the word, and Miss West, Mr. West, You should have sent the children back. Then there's accidental. The child's death is an unintentional outcome of parental physical abuse. Then there's spousal revenge. The parent kills the child in the effort to exact revenge on the other parent. Now, some of us would argue accidental, because if the child is being abused and regularly abused, common sense would tell you something terrible would happen, such as death, if you are constantly beating a child, subjecting a child to any type of cruel and unusual beating or punishment. So those are the said different manners of filicide: spousal revenge, accidental, unintentional outcome, unwanted child, acute psychosis, and altruism. This is content from 2017. CNN is the source, CNN.com. Naturally, the stats are probably much different because this is almost 6 years old. Why were these children murdered? Were they a hindrance to Jacqueline and Trezell West? Who was the initial perpetrator of abuse of the children? Was it Jacqueline or Trezell or both? What happened to those children? Did they die at the same time? Was the manner of death the same? Or the children killed separately at different times? Did the children ever leave Bakersfield, California? Did they make it to Cal City? Did one make it and one did not? That is the testimony from court. Differences of what the children told law officials December 2020. Perhaps their opinions are different because time has gone by. The children have had different experiences, good and bad, memory lapses, and they just can't remember what they told law officials. But as I said, the differences in versions is a win-win for the defense, because their job is to project reasonable doubt that Jacqueline Trezell West did not commit these crimes and that some other entity, persons, took the children. So when you have children varying in their versions, this is what they want. The children don't remember. Maybe the children are lying to cover for the parents they wish they could be with again. See, you never know. But next to testify is one of the biological children. That is to commence today. We will also wait to hear the state's evidence against Jacqueline Trezell West of why they believe the children are deceased, why they believe the children were murdered in the month of September 2020, the motive of death, and possibly the reasoning for filing the false report to emergency services that the children were taken or wandered off. And that is also a charge they're facing, calling 911. What is the evidence that the state has against these two to say the children are dead? Will there be forensic evidence such as blood, any type of fluid from the human body, matter from the body, skin, sweat, any type of residue, human residue, any type of filming the deaths of the children via phone device, and also any noise, conversations heard from other neighbors or other people, persons, and also the testimony from the children. Will we hear that the children witnessed the deaths of these children, got information of the deaths, and also participated in the deaths of the children? We will see what happens. It's very tragic because naturally, when you come to the earth, you have no idea when you're going to leave here. And it's not something that many people focus on. And naturally, a child wouldn't be focusing on his or her demise. 2 and 3 and 4, that's not even something that you would even know anything about. And as I've said before in my commentary pertaining to the Cal City boys, they didn't have a chance. And I think it's obvious from what we've seen and the testimony in court. You have children who entered into foster care as infants and stayed in foster care up until toddlers, to only be adopted by the people who had them for at least a year or so, and then they're murdered. There's been no justice for them, no rallying for them before even going into foster care, in my opinion, because I feel like there should have been somebody who could have taken these children in and kept them so they didn't have to end up here. But that's the gist of the story. There are no guarantees of a parent treating their child with respect, a foster care treating the child with respect, or just leaving your child with someone you think you could trust to keep your child or raise your child. And it's evident that sometimes strangers do treat children better than their biological parent or family members. But in this case, with these kids, they just didn't have a chance. I think it's obvious. Because let's be truthful, there are no guarantees that these children would have had a better life with their biological parents and or relatives. And I think that's the reason why the state did not let the children go to any biological family members, because they didn't want to run the risk of the children being in danger again, for the very reason they got into foster care, placed into foster care, removed from the biological mother. Because many times family members will still let the parents see the children, and then something terrible happens on the grandparents, aunties, whomever watch when they knew they weren't supposed to allow those said parents to see the children. And unfortunately, in this case, the wrong foster parents got custody of the children, adopted the children, and later murdered the children. I pray for justice for these baby boys in the short life that they led. And I don't think it was a great life, obviously. And if we learn from other people that the children cried a lot and seemed unhappy, looked unhappy, it'll probably just confirm why they got gone. These people just tired of them and no longer wanted to deal with the children. Whether the children came unhappy or they just couldn't handle them, or just was blatantly cruel for no reason. And I don't see them ever telling the truth about the children's disposition and what actually happened in Bakersfield and Cal City. So we have to rely on the testimony from the children, neighbors, family members, outsiders, the state, medical records, neighbors, anybody that can give a testament, truthful and factual. And as I said before in my commentary pertaining to this case, I find it strange that no relative, friend has ever came forward to speak on behalf of these people or against them. You briefly heard from his parents from ABC News, but you never heard from Jacqueline's mother or any of her other relatives pertaining to who they are and who she is and what type of mother she is. Don't you find that strange? Her mother never spoke up. So will she testify during this trial pertaining to her daughter and when she last saw the children? And when was the last time she actually saw the baby boys, Jacqueline's mom? Will Wanda West testify of who her son is, how she raised him, last time she saw the boys? Because her husband has testified that when they moved to Cal City, the family, they did not see the smaller children. Okay, someone here says, I listened to the whole audio trial today. I believe the younger kids are very scared of Jacqueline and Trezell. I wish they weren't in the courtroom to where they can see them. Well, Marie, we have someone else who is basically on board, Miss Millie, and perhaps this is why the version has changed. They still either care for their parents and or fear them. And it could be a combination of both. They still love their parents, but scared of their parents. And although they probably have not seen their parents for years now, 2 years or more, there still may be some fear and there still may be even feelings for them. And we have learned people care for people who don't mean them well and don't treat them well. It's a sick emotion to have any type of feelings for somebody who has mistreated you. But when you're children, you're still dealing with a childlike mindset. So that's to be expected, that a child would still favor a mean parent. And even if they weren't mean to their biological children, and they knew and saw that they were mistreating the foster and adopted children, they still could favor their parents. And then you could have those children who don't favor their parents, don't want to be around them. Each child is different. And as I've always said, that you could have several children in a household growing up with the same mother and father, but each child will have a different perception of their childhood. So we'll ask that question before I check out of here. Are the children afraid of Jacqueline and Trezell? And that is why their versions changed during testimony yesterday. Or could it just be a lapse of memory due to time? Do they want to see their parents? Do they want their parents vindicated? And do they want to go back and live with their parents? Because what would be sad is if these children still care and love their parents and want to be with them, even after witnessing and or participating in the deaths of the small children. And we also have to pray for these children, what they saw and participated in, because they are products of Jacqueline and Trezell West, and it will be a pity and a shame, an atrocity. These children grow up to become menaces and then later adult criminals because of what they witnessed as children and what they participated in. Okay, Kimberly said it's on Court TV. Okay, sweetheart. Hold on one second. Let me check. 1 second. Thanks for that information. Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream. Let's see. See what I can come up with here. Right. Second. Well, I just see there's an update from 13 hours ago pertaining to Kohlberger's case. Surviving roommate agrees to interview with Kohlberger's attorneys. Interesting. I don't see anything on Court TV. What is it about, Court TV? Is it on Court TV? Kimberly, what are you speaking of? I thought you were saying that you saw something pertaining to Cal City on Court TV. Pertaining to the testimony yesterday. I don't see anything. I'm going back 6 days. There's nothing here about Cal City. I'll bring you an update pertaining to Lori Vallow. There's a lot for me to recap, so that next live will possibly be very winded. I'll try to get that information out tomorrow because I've been very busy, so I haven't been able to bring you an update pertaining to Lori Vallow, Daybell. But there's a lot of information pertaining to people who have testified, evidentiary material pertaining to the deaths of the children, manner of deaths, Tammy Daybell, what actually happened. The 911 call has been released of Mr. Chad calling 911. And a lot of comparisons between his rendition in that call and how Lori has behaved. Night and day. He's fake crying, and she has shown little of no emotion except for crying once when her sister got on the witness stand last week, and her asking the judge the week before to be removed when they were showing pictures of JJ being exhumed and what was left of Tylee Ryan. Very disturbing information. So I'll bring you an update pertaining to Lori possibly tomorrow. And also I'll be back to tell you what happened with testimony from one of the children Jacqueline Giselle's son. I want to thank you all for your time. And once again, channel donations, $ Big Angie, 129 Cash App, stickers and chats are welcome during the live stream. Thank you, Brittany, for coming on to give your opinion pertaining to the latest information in this trial. The estimate that this trial may wrap up by May 17th, which is just a few weeks away. We're in the first month of May. So we will see what happens, who will testify next, if there'll be any more relatives testifying, and naturally, the evidence against the two that led to the indictment of murder of both children, child abuse, and falsifying call to 911 for emergency help. The one thing I thought about in listening to the district attorney from last year's information is the child abuse. It's a second-degree murder charge, which means, it wasn't directly done, perhaps. They're liable, but not pre-planned. That's what I'm trying to say, pre-planned. Because first degree means like deliberate. Child abuse charge, I think of the obvious. Had they been abusing these children ever since they got them? If not, when did it start? And are the children who remain alive are the ones giving testament to child abuse of these children by them, the parents, and also the manner of death? That oldest foster child is the youngest child brother. That's where he wanted to go back. That oldest foster child is the youngest child brother. Oh, okay. Foster child. Well, I don't see why anyone would want to go back. If I witness you mistreating small children, I don't think I'd want to go back. As I said earlier in this live, the only reason I can see the child wanting to go back is if the place that he was when speaking to Wanda was not a great place. And that also would lead me to believe the child, obviously like Wanda, to be after the fact still talking to her. And is she a really nice person? I don't think so, because of how she reacted when someone drove by her asking her where were the children, and she said at your house, which I thought was a very disrespectful thing to say, considering the children were missing, considering she never saw them again. Her husband now testifying in court, they never saw them again, and they had to have known something was wrong when they didn't see them. Did they ask where the children were? How long did they know the children were not in Jacqueline and Giselle's custody? Did they suspect them of harming the children? Did they ever tell them they harmed the children? What's the truth? What do they actually know pertaining to the deaths of these kids? See, that's where I have the problem with Wanda West. Perhaps she knows more than she's let on. And perhaps she's like a lot of people. When they get wind of people missing children, whomever, they already have an idea that they've done something. They just don't come out and formally say, yeah, I think my son and daughter killed those kids. Because if you uphold your children in wrongdoing and mischief, and you've done it a lot, you're definitely not going to squill on your kids. Yes, it was very disrespectful. They at your house. No, they ain't at their house. This is not even a normal answer to reply to a stranger driving by asking, hey, where are the kids? What you do is you ignore that person. But I think she liked the attention of YouTubers running around filming. They're all on the neighbors' yards filming, trying to get a look at the house to see what the house looked like outside and what was going on in the backyard and get any glimpse of them coming and going. It was just a circus. And what's sad is we now know that while all that was going on with those YouTubers on the ground, making live streams, those kids were dead and gone. Months, allegedly. This is what the state is claiming. Those children were dead and gone September 2020. So with all the hoopla, running around out there to the house in Cal City, running around trying to go to places that they frequent, running around following them in the street in Bakersfield, running around watching Wanda's house and breaking in cars and vans and all this old type of nonsense, the children were dead and gone. If we're to believe the state's allegation against the two. And that's what I'm waiting for, is to hear what the state has against this couple. As the district attorney said in the audio I played from last year, circumstantial and also what they gathered. So will there be forensics, eyewitness testimony from the children or outsiders, phone pings, and anything visual via a device, such as filming the deaths of the children? Because it'll be very cruel to find out, besides the act of murder itself, but to know that they filmed the deaths of the children. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful week. Please check my community board for said information, updates, polls, breaking news. You have been listening to The Vault XL.